While the past two NBA Finals have featured the same two teams, each series was dramatically different. One factor that separated the two series was the play of Warriors point guard Steph Curry. Just looking at his base numbers, you can see some indications as to why the Warriors were unable to win their second title in a row. While there was an uptick in his three-point shooting, his minutes, scoring, rebounding, assists, and steals all went down, some in dramatic fashion. Dig a little deeper, and you start to see some trends that indicated a shift in the type of role Steph Curry played in the offense. You can see a large drop in the sheer number of passes thrown per game, and this could explain how his number of touches shrunk significantly. Peeking at his on-off numbers for a minute, you can see that in 2015, the Warriors were significantly better when he was on the court, with improvement on both the offensive and defensive ends when he was out there. Compare that to 2016, and it was a different picture. That said, with every game except the last being a blowout, these numbers are a little screwy, but it's clear that he was not the same player and did not have the same effect this year. Steph Curry is a very unique player, and depending upon where he begins the offensive possession in the half court, tends to yield very different results. To begin, let's examine the results of possessions when Curry started with the ball in his hands versus on the weak side off the ball. In the 2015 Finals, you can see the offense was much more effective with Curry on the ball, where he used 44 possessions per game for a very efficient 1.05 points per possession. The 2015 clips will all be in black and white, and you can see how Curry starting with the ball and pushing the pace into their half-court attack quickly caused a lot of problems for the Cavs defense. They simply couldn't get organized quickly enough to contest these shots. And when they baited the defense into trapping him off the pick and roll, the Warriors eventually figured out how to use Curry's gravity to their advantage. And when Curry started off the ball, the Warriors struggled a bit at 0.9 points per possession. With Curry away from the ball, it allowed the Cavs to body up on him and use their strength to take away his cutting off screens. And there were a lot of times that once Curry wasn't directly involved in the initial attack, he simply drifted along the perimeter as his teammates tried to generate points without him. In 2016, however, the Steph effect was completely flipped. In terms of effectiveness, when Curry started off the ball, the offense performed at almost the same efficiency as the 2015 on-ball rate, and his on-ball this year matched the off-ball from last year. With Steph off the ball, you can see how physical the defense was allowed to get with him, but the Warriors were able to get him setting off-ball screens to free up teammates. And this went a long way to helping guys like Klay and Draymond find their own shots, while Curry did his best to attract the focus of the defense until the weak spot could be exploited. We divided up the way Curry attacks into several categories, and one thing to look at is the not involved section. Most often, these were possessions where he spent most of the time on the weak side, uninvolved with the offensive attack. We did fold some of his assists into this category when he simply dribbled in place and made a simple pass to a shooter, but these were few and far between. Klay Thompson took the most shots by far of this kind, essentially serving as a way for Steph to rest while Klay went to work creating his own shots. Interestingly, Klay was much more efficient when Curry brought the ball up before passing and then not being involved in the rest of the attack. Whereas when Curry began the possession without the ball and then didn't get a chance to use his threat with some sort of action, Klay's efficiency dropped quite far, with a number of tough isolation shots that had little chance of going in. The not involved category jumped 5 possessions per game for Steph in this year's Finals. However, the overall efficiency improved this year versus last. The defense was pretty physical at times, and there were a number of possessions where Steph didn't seem up to fighting through it to get open, content to stand still and use the threat of his cut to the best of his abilities. but often leaving his teammates to create for themselves. What is interesting is that Curry had an almost perfect balance of not being involved whether he brought the ball up or started off the ball, and the efficiency of those possessions were also remarkably consistent. The pick and roll was another area that radically changed from year to year. In 2015, you can see the number of pick and rolls when he brought the ball up skyrocketed, averaging 19 of them per game. And these plays were lethal, as they finally figured out that the defense couldn't be overly physical with him when he had the ball for fear of fouling him. However, you can see what a difference a year makes. The amount of possessions where Curry brought the ball up and executed the pick and roll dropped to only 8 per game. That kind of dip is unheard of, and these plays proved woefully inefficient. We also examined the times Curry got a switch and isolated on the big man out of the pick and roll. Remember all those shots Curry hit on Tristan Thompson after forcing the switch? In fact, there were only 6 of these in Thompson's face during the 2015 finals, but they served to open up everything else by the sheer threat of that shot going in, and the Warriors scored in a very healthy 1.13 points per possession on them. In 2016, it was a radically different picture. Curry doubled the amount of ISOs after pick and rolls, but struggled to score with a 0.88 points per possession. Compared to the clips we just showed you, there's a noticeable difference in the way Curry attacked Thompson. With just enough uncertainty to give the defense enough time to recover to force a difficult shot. And there were enough instances where he settled for the long jumper without doing his dance to get a more open shot, leading to some extremely ugly, although uncharacteristic, bricks. So far, the picture being painted is that Curry clearly was more aggressive and effective in 2015, and there are a multitude of reasons. While you may want to argue how his knee felt, it was clear he didn't move with the same energy or explosion in 2016. And the Cavaliers also moved away from blitzing and doubling him in the pick and roll, which limited Draymond Green's effectiveness in the short roll, something that hurt the Cavs toward the end of the 2015 finals. Since three-point shooting is such a heavy staple of the Warriors' offense, we decided to look at how their threes were generated in relation to Steph Curry's role in that possession. What fascinated me the most was the incredible increase of threes attempted when Steph Curry was not involved in the offense. In 2015, the Warriors averaged almost 9 three-point attempts per game when Steph Curry was not involved. In 2016, that number increased to almost 12 attempts per game, indicating that his teammates were less patient with the offense, opting to shoot quicker threes off less passes and taking shots the defense wanted them to take. Another point of interest is how well the Warriors did on threes out of the pick and roll. They were able to generate a ton more threes this way in 2015 and destroyed the Cavaliers' defense in the process, as the defense was forced to rotate under the pressure of a Curry attack, and it opened up good shots which they hit. On the flip side, in this year's finals, they could only generate 4.7 looks per game from beyond the arc, with another gigantic drop-off to 0.73 points per possession, right around half as well as they did the year before. Looking at Curry's own threes, he hurt the Cavs defense the most with bombs out of isolation. These were the Tristan Thompson shots. Plus, he had several of the crazy, insane variety after multiple combinations of complex dribble moves that served to get him that sliver of daylight, inspire his teammates, and wow the crowd. However, in 2016, the volume of isolation threes went down a lot. And while his effectiveness was good, they were few and far between, and you can see that he just wasn't the same player this year. His movements weren't nearly as aggressive and explosive, an obvious reason why he limited these opportunities. As for Curry's threes out of the pick and roll, the Cavs had a serious problem containing them, and Curry got open on quite a few. His 1.24 points per possession was very good, and he got almost 3 of these attempts per game. In 2016, he got a similar number of attempts per game, but just look at his efficiency. With this type of struggle in this most used category to get three-point shots, it put extra pressure on his teammates that ultimately they couldn't contend with. Of course, there are two elephants in the room regarding Curry's play this year: turnovers and defense. Let's start with the turnovers. To normalize for minutes played, we see that Curry turned it over a little bit more this year, but he actually did well to limit them the last 4 games of the series. That said, the ones he did commit were real doozies, and some of them had a direct effect on the outcome of the game. Whether you want to acknowledge his health or not, there is no excuse for some of these passes that led directly to scores on the other end for the Cavaliers. Risky, poorly executed, and horrible decisions that torpedoed the offense unnecessarily. The Warriors were able to overcome their turnover issues in the past with elite three-point shooting as a team, but when their struggles from beyond the arc became real, there was no way to bail them out from these mistakes, Curry's being among the worst of them. As for Curry's defense, he clearly had much less to do in 2015 guarding the likes of Iman Shumpert and Matthew Dellavedova. Without Irving and Love, the Cavs' offense devolved into a lot of stagnant ISOs for LeBron that gave him big but inefficient numbers. However, the very presence of Kyrie in this year's finals completely changed the dynamic and forced Curry to be much more involved on the defensive end, serving to not only tire him out, but put him in a lot more positions to get scored on and commit fouls. In the 2015 finals, the Cavs scored on 208 half-court possessions when Curry was on the floor. Curry's defense had a direct hand in only 25 of those possessions, or 12%. In the same category this year, Curry was on the floor for 192 of those possessions, but his defense was directly involved in 53 of them, or 27.6%. And many of those scores were not pretty from the Warriors' perspective, as Curry got beat backdoor quite a bit and got caught out of position, reaching in, unable to keep Kyrie in front of him to pressure his shot. What was even stranger was a disturbing pattern of him losing his man completely, which I can assure you didn't happen that much at all during the regular season. There were some examples of him playing good positional defense and contesting shots well that the Cavs just happened to hit, the kind of defense he was so consistent with during the year. But let's face it, Kyrie is a wizard who makes everybody on the planet look foolish no matter what they do to defend him. That said, too often in this finals, Curry would make a foolish gamble and give up easy points instead. While much has been made of LeBron singling Curry out, he only scored points on Curry on 8 possessions the whole series. Kyrie, on the other hand, was able to abuse Curry on 20 possessions over 7 games. And after Game 3, Steve Kerr was forced to put Curry on J.R. Smith, letting the better defender in Klay handle Kyrie. In the end, you can see that Steph Curry hasn't really lived up to his MVP status in the finals thus far. Playing on a deep team affords him some cushion, and it's not to say there weren't some incredible fireworks that played a key role in propelling his team to one title and the absolute brink of another. But there was clearly something different in 2016, something that dramatically altered the way the Warriors had him attacking the defense, going away from much of what worked well the year before. And with Kyrie Irving on the floor, it completely altered the way the Warriors could use Curry on defense. That's not to say it was a failure. Building a 3-1 lead is commendable, but it seems pretty clear that if Steph Curry could have recreated just a tiny bit more of his magic from the regular season, it would be the Warriors celebrating their 2nd title in a row instead of the Cavaliers giving Cleveland a downtown parade for the first time in 52 years.
We get ready for next year.